Good day, guys. Welcome to Calculate Mind Academy, and we'll be looking at hypothesis under statistics today. So, what is hypothesis testing? It's basically a statistical method used to make this informed decision about a population based on a sample data. When we say sample data can be either a randomly sampled data or a grouped or biased data. So, hypothesis testing simply involves collecting data, testing an assumption, and testing whether it's believable or not. For example, we have a nail factory which produces nail and want to decide whether those nails are above or below a particular size. For example, now we have and a nail batch, and we want to decide whether these nails are over or below 30 degrees. So now we can say that the nail size are equal to 30 centimeter. And this is basically hypothesis testing. So now we can go into we can take a random sample and test whether the nail size is actually 30 centimeter and know whether this is below or above 30 centimeter. So that is basically hypothesis testing. So we are going to be looking at key parameters which is involved in hypothesis testing. So we'll be looking at the null hypothesis. This is basically the assumed or standard form of standard mean, which is being accepted. It's being represented with the sign HO. So this is what we use to represent a null hypothesis. So we'll be looking secondly at the alternate hypothesis, which is basically the hypothesis which provides an alternate view of what the null hypothesis says. So in simple terms, it's basically a hypothesis that tends to disagree or invalidate what the null hypothesis is saying. So it's being represented with the symbol HA. So that is it. For level of significance, is basically the amount of risk that we are able to take in the sample. Like now, the amount of error the amount of error that we are willing to accept in the sample. So is the level of significance is basically a degree of error present in the batch. So secondly, we'll be looking at level of confidence. Level of confidence is the amount of confidence we have in this particular batch of sample. It's being represented as C, and this being represented as alpha. So it's basically the level of confidence that we have in this batch that what we are doing is correct. So summing up the level of confidence and level of significance together, they sum up to 100. So we should have that in mind also, that the level of confidence and level of significance sum up to 100. So those are the key parameters involved in hypothesis testing. So we'll also be looking at when to use Z-test and T-test. So this is a very important point where most students miss it out on hypothesis testing, which tends to confuse them a lot. So we'll be looking at Z-test. What is Z-test? Z-test is like a statistical method used in hypothesis testing to either develop to calculate for the calculated value of Z. So when do we know when to use Z-test? When n is greater than or equals to 30, and we know the value of the population standard deviation. So when the value of the standard deviation is known, you use a Z-test, and n is greater or equal to 30, you use Z-test. And when do we know when to use T-test? When n, which is the sample size, is less than 30, and the population standard deviation is unknown. Thank you for watching. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe.